This is Isaac from I.B.Plastering, and I'm going to take you through the entire process of plastering a ceiling. We have everything prepped up. We've got a bit of expanding foam in some of the cracks in the boards. We've got a scrim all nicely secured and all the cracks around the edges. First things first, you want to make sure all your tools, all your buckets, everything like that is clean. So on this drill, we've got a bit of plaster. I'm just going to hit that off. I'm just going to dip it in our dirty water bucket, give it a spin. You always want to have a dirty water bucket, one that you're not going to use to mix up or anything like that. And that is because you clean your tools. You don't want to get the dirty water in your mix because it will make it go faster, make it go off faster. Let's give that a quick spin in there. I'm going to be mixing up in this bucket. You can even just rest that like that. Get a bag, give it a little drops till all the dust drops to the bottom, and then we open it like this, drop, pull like that. Pull that top straight off. No chunks in the top. And then I've got about half a bag's worth of water in there, so I'm going to pour about half a bag in. And you generally want to see like a mountain of plaster on the top when you're mixing. So when you're mixing, if you push the drill onto the side of the bucket and make the bucket vibrate, it's just going to loosen up all those chunks and bring them into the middle so it all mixes up nicely. Okay, once we let that spin for a little bit, we're going to get our bucket trail, which is somewhere here. And we're just going to scoop around the outsides, around the edges of that plaster. Because, as you can see, I don't know if you can see that, but you get dry bits that get stuck to the side. So you don't want that in your mix because it will just drag through and create nasty lines on your wall. So you're going to get them off the side of the bucket and get them into the middle, where they then get mixed into the plaster. Bucket traps fall in there while you're mixing it. There we go. Give that a tap, and then we're just going to spin it in the dirty water bucket again. Going to get our brush. I'm just going to give it a little brush down to get that plaster off so it doesn't set on the drill. When you're plastering, you want as much room as possible, so anything you don't need in the room, take it out of the room, because it's only something for you to trip over. It's only something. Now I'm just going to clean the handle of my bucket trail because I don't want to get caked in plaster really. There we go, so now we have our load of plaster ready to go. Move that to the side of the room. We have our hawk somewhere. Just in the out. Now, with the hawk, before you get anything on it, just going to give it a little wet up like that. Make sure it's wet. So then when you put the plaster on it, it doesn't just dry out, get the edges as well. Just like so. Make sure it's clean as well. I know it looks dirty, but all that plaster that's on it's dry, that won't come off. Make sure you trowel, give that a little bit of a scrub, make sure that's wet as well, like so. And the tops, these edges here. There we go. Even any little bits like this, so as you can see on my tray here, there's a little bit of plaster. Any bits like that you want to get off. And on that side. There you go. Let's give that one little wipe down. Get those loose bits off so they don't go into our plaster and end up dragging. Get this down to the side. And now we're ready to get the plaster on the ceiling. So a lot of water in there. Give that a little wipe. Get a little bit of plaster like this on your trowel. Smudge it on your hawk. And then you're just going to spread that onto your hawk. And what that does is when you get the plaster on it, it's not going to just fall off straight away. it's going to bind to your hawk a little bit better. So how much you want a scoop like this, another scoop. When you're starting out, I'd recommend just going like a big scoop at a time. You got it and then go like this. Give it a little bounce like that, and that's just going to pull it up, and then it's going to give it a bit more suction onto the hawk, so then again it's less likely to fall off. So we're going to start here, we're going to drag it back to about halfway, and then we're going to turn around and we're going to do the same thing. Nice long line, so the longer your line is, more sort of area you're covering at one time, the faster you can put it on. And that's sort of the aim of the game, really. Put it on as quickly as possible, while maintaining, you know, cleanliness and, you know, keeping it good quality. There you go, that's one hawk on the ceiling. Now what we're going to do is just going to get that edge on there. So I'm going to get a bit of plaster on that side of my trowel where the gap is, and I'm just going to put that there like that. And then as you'll see, there's a little bit of I don't know if you can see this on the camera angle, but there is a little bit of a gap here, so I'm just going to get a little bit on the hook. And I'm just going to put it out like that, just to get into that corner, make it nice and sharp. Do that just along the whole way. Now, when you're plastering, you want to be careful. You've got open windows, you're plastering a hallway where there's a drift or a breeze going through. It can set your plaster off a bit quicker. Now, I've got the window open because it's not very windy today. It's quite a nice day, and I don't have to worry about that, but if it is windy, you just want to be careful of that, because it can turn into a bit of a nightmare if your stuff's setting off really quickly, especially if you've got a big hit on. Don't really want that to be happening, so make sure there's not too much of a breeze if it's windy outside. There we go. Just give it one trowel down there after we've got all of them up on that we want. And I'm just going to tray it out. So you can already see here where I am, that's pretty flat, and we've only just put it on. It doesn't need to be that flat now, but it always helps because it just means there's less for me to do later. I'm not going to be rushing around as much, and it's going to be a bit more calm, and that means overall we're going to get a better finish. When you're plastering, you're stressed out, you're here, there, you're everywhere. It shows in your work. Going to move up, step up over. Got a line of scrim here, so your scrim's going to take up a little bit more gear than just, you know, the standard board, because you've got to fill in the scrim. And we're coming up to a light as well. So I'm just going to see that. What you want to do as well, I mean, that was an accident what I did there, but if you've got a bit of gear that you can see is going to fall, get your hawk underneath it so it doesn't just splatter onto the floor. Or onto your dust sheet, because you should be putting dust sheets down. There we go. Repeat that process until your ceiling's completely on. When I put my plaster on, I don't put it on right in the corner. I don't get it on and then push it into the corner like so. I come off the corner by about an inch or two, then I drag it back, and then I push it back through into the corner, take my hawk off, and then I put my trowel back into the corner and I drag it out one more time. And what that does is, there's a little bit of stuff on the wall here, but there isn't as much as if I just got it and I just lobbed it into the corner. You're going to get crap all around your edges, and it's just more to clean up. So, saving yourself time, you just come off of the edge a little bit every time that you pull. And what I'm going to do, because I've got a spotlight just there, is I'm just going to put a bit around that spotlight so I don't have to fiddle around with it. I'm going back the other way. Like so. A little bit there as well. There we go. If there's any really deep, like quite prominent lines like that, you don't need to get them out now, but I always like to, because if I've got a big hit on, then, and I need to leave it for a little bit longer because I'm busy putting on a lot of stuff, that big line's going to harden, and even when you go over it, it's going to go down, but it won't go down the full way. So you always want to get them really big lines out of your plaster, really. On a hit like this, it's quite a small ceiling. You wouldn't really need to worry about it as much. So now I'm on the other side. I'm doing the exact same thing, but when I'm coming to the plaster that I've already done, I'm just going like that. I'm just curling it in so it's nice and smooth like that, see? Something a lot of plasterers do, which messes them up, is something I used to do as well, is they get over their hit too early. So they put the plaster on, they want to trail it up and make it look nice straight away. You want to let it go in, you want to wait about, 10, 15 minutes. It can vary depending on the conditions, what it is in your room. Like again, if there's a draft coming through, the background you're on, which, you'll learn these things if you're plastering. But that said, if you've got a big hit on and it's taking you longer to put the whole hit on, you could finish putting on, and then by the time you finished, where you started, it's ready to trail. The last little bit here, and we're on. It's a very nice feeling when you're a plasterer and then you've got your hit on, and then you ain't got to worry about putting it on anymore. It's the hardest part. Obviously, you have your second coat, so that's what I'm referring to really, is when you've got your second coat on, but it's always a nice feeling. You can see what I'm standing on right now. This hopper, very, very good for plasterers. You can extend the legs. I think you can reach ceilings up to about 3 meters. They extend by quite far. And I've got a lot of room to walk about, so I ain't really got to worry about stepping off the back of it. So now I've got the room. Still going to be careful, but left on the block. Look at this edge. I've got some bumps there, so I'm just going to put a bit more plaster on there. I'm going to pull that out because there was a bit of a, that was where one of the cracks, not the crack in the board, or the joint in the board was. And there's a little hump there. Put a little bit extra there. Pull that out. There we go. Lovely stuff. Now that's all on. I've got another little cupboard in there, which I'm going to go and do now. So, see you in about 5 minutes. Okay, so now we're completely on. Now, I've got a bit of spare plaster, you're always going to have a little bit left over. Not always, but a lot of the time, because you can't perfectly gauge it. So what you do, you've got a load of spare plaster in the bucket. If you've got an empty plaster bag, which I don't have at the minute, then you can make a little bin out of that. You just put it in there. Or just put it in a rubber sack, whatever. But the best method is if you've got an empty bag like this, I'm not going to waste that, put it in there. And what you do is you fold over the edges like so, when it's all open like that, to give it 2 little folds, and you just dump it all in there. However, I'm going to go and find another way to dispose of this. Okay, so you've just seen phase 1, which just includes putting the scrim on, making sure your tools are all clean, mixing up the plaster, and then getting it on where you're plastering. This is the start of phase 2, so now all of our plaster is out of the bucket. This means to clean the bucket for putting on our second layer. So we're going to put our dirty water in there. Gonna get our mixing drill. We're just gonna spin that around in the bucket. Clean our little bucket drill. Not only does that give the driller clean, but we're also cleaning that bucket out. Now I need a brush. So the water spinning, it's easier if you keep the water spinning like this. So you brush around the edges, get all of that plaster off. Because what makes a good plasterer is a plasterer that keeps his tools clean. All of his buckets, his trails, everything. Keep your tools clean, they'll do a good job. Even on the top like that. There we are. Now, before we tip this water back out into the dirty water bucket, we're going to get it spinning. Just to get all the loose bits that might be in the bottom out, up and out the water, off the bottom. I'm going to tip it, leave a little tiny bit in, give it a little swirl, get that last bit in there. And it's just little bits like that. It might seem meaningless, but every little thing is going to help you, to keep clean, keep bits out of your mix. Then we've got another bucket here with clean water in, and we're just going to put in the water for our second mix. So I'll get about half a bag, one about a quarter of a bag, about that much water. Now that's ready to go, ready to mix up. We're going to clean our tools as well. This is our bucket drill. You're going to be very meticulous with this, get it all off the top. And the sides. I'm just going to let it sit for 5, 10, maybe even 15 minutes. In the winter, you might even let it cool for 20 minutes because it's a lot colder. So if you're a smoker, go have a little smoke break. If you don't smoke, I don't know, go on your phone or something. Now I haven't got the best brush. You can get, say, a bigger brush, clean it faster, stronger bristles, but not really a big deal. There we are. Now the tools are ready, mixing bucket's ready to get that second coat mixed up. I'll brush that down here. Now this is a very good brush because what it allows me to do is I ain't got to get on the pop-up. I can just brush around the edges like this. And just reach and brush them. And that just means that any dry bits that are drying out quicker because they have made contact with the wool, which isn't really sealed because we're not plastering them, are going to get wet again, and they're not going to then drag through the plaster as I'm trading it up. And it also just neatens the edges up and makes them look nicer. We say a perfectionist makes a good plasterer. Because a lot of it is, obviously, yeah, you need the skill, but a lot of it is just being a perfectionist. If you're not happy with something, or you see something that's wrong, there's a hole, there's a little bit of plaster on the wall, there's a little line that you're not quite happy with, you get it out. Don't just be lazy and think, oh, I'll get that later, after I've had a smoker. You want to get it all done when it needs to get done. So I'm just going to check actually that I have got a bit of time, or whether it wants to get on now. So I'm just going to feed it. So over here, that's still very wet. Over here, that's still quite wet. This is where we started. That's still quite wet. That's the join. There's another join here. That's a little bit drier where this join is. And that might just be because there's 1 or 2 layers of scrim there, which is drying out a bit quicker. But yeah, when you touch the ceiling, if you then get a load of the plaster stick to your fingers, you're making the prints in the plaster really easily with no force at all, then you want to leave it. But if you're touching it it's not coming off in your fingers, you're not really making any dents. You really want to get on that ceiling as quickly as possible, get it trailed up, and then get your next coat on. Okay, so we've just had about a 10-minute break, coming back to it, and it's ready to trail up. So we're going to trail it up quickly, get the bucket out of the way, and then we're going to mix up when you get a second coat on. So you want to go in the same order that you put it on. I'm going to start over here, but if there's another section of your ceiling that's drying out faster, you want to start there. So you want to hold your trail at a slight angle. Don't want to hold it directly straight, really. And I've got like a little hole here. Got some spare muck on my thing, so I'm just going to go like that, push the muck onto the ceiling. I'm just going to go over it again just so it fills that hole in. Again, got a little bit of a dip there, so I'm going to put my muck there and go trail. And that's what you want to do if you get holes, is get the spare muck on the trail and you just want to push it into that hole, because that will show through if you don't sort it out. Now you want to be proficient really in trailing forwards and trailing backwards. So you can really, you know, you have a bit more freedom as to where you can go, what you can do. You ain't got to like spin around and all that. And what you want to do really is when you're trailing like this, you want to have a slight angle. You don't really want to trail it like that. You trail it like this, you're just going to scrape all that plaster back off the ceiling. So you only want a slight angle like that really to, you know, push it down nicely. You're not really making it perfect at this point because you've still got a second coat to go on it. And well, it's not really going to be getting perfect. And just here is actually a little bit more set in, a little bit drier because that window's open. But it's all right because it's only a small bit, and I can manage that. I've never really filmed any videos like this to go on social media, but I thought to myself, well, I'm going to start making these videos where I sort of teach people how to plaster, because I think it'd be quite handy. Right, so that half's done. Move the rotary up. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to pull this corner out slightly, like this. Little, sort of like a rotational pull. So I'm sort of putting my trail in, and I'm sort of doing this, like that motion. It's hard to explain, but if you give it a go, you sort of get a feel for it and you understand what I mean. And then we're just going to go up there. Get all those lines out, like so. Already that ceiling is looking very lovely. It's going to turn out very nice. You want to be able to plaster with both your right hand and your left hand, because when one of your arms gets tired, which they do get, you can then start using the other arm. And also in some areas it's awkward to use, say, your right arm. And you want to be able to use your left arm. So I've just done that. So I've got a bit of spare muck on my trail there. I'm just going to put that in my dirty water bucket, because I might need that just to fill something in, whatever. So now we're going to mix up our second coat. I'm try and do it so you can see. Move this out of the way. Exact same thing as what we did for the first coat, but you want about half the amount. So your first coat is going to go on, and then your second coat is going to be about half the amount of what your first coat is. Also, you want to mix it up a little bit wetter, so it's got a little bit more play to it, a bit thinner. And that's because you've already filled out all the gaps you want to fill. And it just helps bind to that second coat a bit better. wait until I can see that mound. So that's a full bag used. Get that out of the way. Okay, you know what, I've actually put a little bit too much in there, so I'm just going to get a little bit. It's clean water. It's fine if you put a bit too much in. You can just add a little bit of water like that and it will be fine. Before I put my bucket tray in there, I'll wash that off. Okay, so that's about the consistency we have here for a first coat. So I'm just going to scrape around the edges like this. Get all the dry bits off. And then I'm just going to add a tiny bit of water. Only a very small bit. Make sure I close it all over. Because I just want to make it a little bit wetter, but not too wet. There we go. Now we finished using the drill now because we got the second coat mixed up, so we're going to get that cleaned properly. Get our dirty water back in. Then, just like before, I'm going to take it out of the room so it's out of the way. There we go, that's nice and clean. Pop that up there. Get that right to the edge of the room so it doesn't get in my way. Now, this is an empty bag, so I'm going to turn this into a bin. Get all the top off like this. And then you're just going to fold it down like so. Fold it once, and fold it twice. There we go, and we've got ourselves a little bin. Lovely. Now I've had this on the floor, so it's going to have picked up a load of dust. I'm just going to give that another clean. You really want to be meticulous with your cleaning. After every trail, after every mix, if you put it on the floor, it's got dust on it, always make sure your tools are clean. That's 100% one of the most important things, to be honest. Now we're ready to put some stuff on the wall, on the ceiling, sorry. After trailing, I've got a dirty trail again, and I just want to clean that. Because that plaster is from the first coat. It's gone off a lot more than what our second coat is. So if I'm going to mix that with the second coat as I'm putting it on, you know, it might leave a drag line, you know, it could lead to all sorts of problems. So there we go. Now we're ready to go fully. There we go. Now I'm just going to get all the excess water off, give it a bit of a shake. And just like before, we're going to get only a tiny bit of that like that. Almost going to plaster onto the whole. There, I've got 2 strokes there. Now I'll just pull this out. And I'm going to just get this corner in while I'm here. Okay, got some little dry bits just put in there. It's alright, we're just going to get them off the ceiling. And we're going to go over the top of them. There we go. The reason that's happened is when I brushed in the edges, like you saw me do earlier, I did that a bit too soon. I should have done that later on when the plaster had actually gotten dry, because when I did it, the plaster was still quite wet. And then it got dry. So I should have waited until the plaster was dry and then gone over it. That was the problem. Okay, so there's a little bit of a line here. So I'm actually going to put a little bit of that muck that's on my trail there. I'm just going to trail over that again so it fills in that hole. There we go. around that line to the sort of curve it round. There you go, now we're up to that again. Now we're going to curve it around the other way. So we're coming up, I'm going to curve it around that way, so like that. When you sort of begin, sort of little things that are on the walls, ceilings, spotlights, sockets, they might seem like a bit of a nightmare to get around, but once you've got the gist of it, you know what to do. You sort of just spin around it just nicely without leaving any lines, and it's not a problem. See, I could have reached over there on the pop-up, probably got on it without having to move it, but you never want to be reaching. That's going to be, you know, you're going to not have as much strength in your arm, not as much stability, and you're going to lead to sort of judder marks. If I'm like this, and I'm trying, like, it's going to leave slight judder marks, and you'll see that. So you always want to be, you know, right on top of where you're plastering. Now, if you had a really big ceiling or a big area that you're plastering, you probably wouldn't do what I just did there, where I was trailing it this way, and then I trailed the edges in that way. You'd probably just get a load of it, and you drag it all up the corner like that, which is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, I do that when I have bigger hits. It's just, I have the time on this ceiling, so I'm just gonna take my time, make it a little bit better. Okay, so before I've even done that, I've just spotted a little bit of dry stuff. So if you can see that and take it off before you've dragged it through the plaster, that's even better. Because now, I won't get any drag lines. It's a nightmare. I'm sure, I don't know how many people will see this, probably not many, but if there's plasterers that see this, you're all going to be whinging, I've done something wrong, that's not the way I plaster. And that's actually something that I don't like about the plastering community. Plasterers seem to enjoy putting other plasterers down, which I don't understand. They'll say, oh yeah, I know he's not very good. And to be honest, I think it's just so they can get more business. But you know, there's so many ways of doing this. You know, you're going to find your own way. One way isn't necessarily better than another. Well, it might be, but if it works, it works. I've worked with probably about 8 plasterers now, actually, before I started my own business. And every single one that I've ever worked with had their own way of doing it. Every single one. There was no plasterer I've worked with that worked like another plasterer. Which is strange, actually. I wonder why. But they are all pretty good. Well, apart from maybe 1 or 2 of them. So there's some holes there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually push a bit of extra gear in there. I'm just going to go over it again. Just like that. Drop a little bit down now. I've actually stayed relatively clean, and that's because I'm just taking it easy. I'm not rushing about, I'm not stressed out. I'm not overloading my hawk. So I'm not dropping really as much. That's one thing as a plasterer you want to avoid at all costs. No matter what happens, don't get stressed out. Don't start moving around frantically. Even if I know that hit that I'm doing maybe isn't as good as what it could be, I don't get stressed out and I just carry on with it, because I can always make it better with a bit of easy feel. I can always fix it up. It's when you start stressing, you make bigger mistakes, you have accidents. So I'm sure it's like that with any trade really. Anyone would tell you that. Too much of a curve there. Just going to very gently take the lines out there. You'll see here I'm going backwards and I'm going forwards, and there's a bit of a trick to that. There's a little bit of a skill to it. So what you want to do, I'm going to try and show you. So you're putting it this way, you're running out of mark, you're putting it on, you come to the end, and then you want to sort of tilt it back that way, so it's sort of like a motion like that. and then you sort of push back over it, get it back to the corner, trail it one more time, and that last trail is where you're making it as flat as you can to sort of make it. This video might be a bit boring. Not many of you, you're not really getting your dopamine from it. It's not fast paced, no fancy editing. Sure as hell won't be doing any of that. But these videos are great for if you want to learn to plaster. There we go. Now the ceiling is completely on. I'm actually just going to give that a little bit of attention there. I might need to, just because where you've worked around it and you've twisted your trails, left a few little marks and lines. And there still is there right now, but when I go over that and try that again, that'll sort that right out. So now we're all on. Got a lot of spare muck left, and we're going to leave it for, you know, another 10-15 minutes until it's a little bit drier, a little bit harder. When we put our hand on it, it doesn't just come off, stick to our fingers. You can still, you know, you've still got a bit of play to it. You're still going to leave marks, but it's not really coming back off your It's not really coming off your fingers as much. Okay, so the second coat is on. I've just done my other ceiling. So what am I doing now? I'm cleaning all my tools, as you might imagine, and I've said about 100 times already. Got all the buckets cleaned out. Any excess plaster is now in that bin that we created. And I'm going to be sort of setting myself up for the next hit. So if I've got a ceiling that I'm doing later or tomorrow, I'm going to scrim that up. You know, I might get my buckets filled with water, getting them all ready in place, get my drill in place. Any bags, might shift them about. Any sort of smarts you see on the wall like this, like that, I'll scrape those off. I might go around the edges neating those up. Anything that doesn't directly involve trailing the ceiling up, but it's going to make the job better, that's what I'm doing as soon as I have got it on. So I'm just going to be making, you know, my job later on a bit more efficient. I'm going to have it all ready and laid out. And now I've got myself a scraper. Now something like this, really, really handy. I'm just going to go around, just scrape off any bits that I've got on the walls, around the edges here where there's quite a bit that's maybe come down. Being a bit more careful that I don't dig into the plaster as well. A good plasterer from a bad plasterer is the cleanliness of how they leave the jobs. Is there plaster all over the walls? Is there plaster in the windows and the window sills, all over the doors and floor? You know, you don't want that in your house or on site, or wherever you might be having anything plastered. So you always want to make sure you have a dust sheet down, no matter where you are. And you always really want to protect windows like this. Now, I was going really slow today and it's quite fast set in, so I'm not going to worry about that too much. As you can see, I haven't actually got anything on that window, so I've been really careful. But if you're starting out, something you definitely want to have is just a layer of plastic that you tape to the window, something like that. I'm just going around just scraping off these excess bits. Now we've done that, and all the that spare stuff, we're going to wipe onto the side of our dirty bucket. We're going to get our long brush, and we're just going to brush in all the edges now that we've sort of scraped the excess off. And it's just going to make them a bit wetter, like I said before. Any bits that are dry, going to have a bit more life put back into them. And it's just going to, any little gaps there might be, it's going to fill them in as well. Any little gaps between the wall and the ceiling. So just here, there's a little gap. You want to regularly dip your brush in water, so you always want to have it wet. You don't really want to be dragging about a dry brush, because it's not really going to help you out at all. Now, all of this muck you can see here, not muck, but that's going to be really easy. I can just get a sponge and that'll just wipe straight off. If you have chunky bits that set there, you know, it's going to be annoying. You're going to have to scrape it all off. It's going to be a lot harder, so just doing this makes the cleanup process a lot easier. obviously if I'm going to then plaster these walls, I probably won't worry about going around the edges and cleaning them up with a sponge, because I'm just going to plaster over the top of it anyway. If I haven't glued on it, then it'll be glued on and it won't matter. But being as I'm not touching these, walls, I'm going to clean them up. There's a bit of a hole there in the wall. I couldn't really have prevented that unless I filled the actual wall in, which I hadn't quoted in to do, but you know what, when I'm doing my next bit, I'll fix it up for them free of charge, because little things like that just, they leave a good impression, you know. There we go. That's literally all there is to it. My walls aren't too mucky right now. Our edges are nice and wet, and the ceiling is still very wet, so we're going to wait 10 minutes.